John Daniel Pagano was raised in the Hudson Highlands of New York and graduated from the State University of New York at New Paltz. He worked early in his career as a teacher for 8 years and since then worked in public history over the last 20 years. John's list of history employment spans the historic Shriver House in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, Old Fort Jackson in Savannah, Georgia, and the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation, the Jamestown Yorktown Foundation, and currently is a historic interpretation supervisor at Henricus Historical Park in Chester, Virginia. He has consulted and advised on over 20 historic films and documentaries and has authored dozens of articles ranging from the 17th century Virginia colony, American Revolution, American Civil War, and public history. In recent years, John authored his first book, The English Pocahontas, 1613 to 1617, 10 Essential Questions, and was a member of the Civic Foundation representing Chesterfield County in London and Gray's Inn, England for the 400th anniversary observance of Pocahontas' death. On site, he is always at Rock Hall presenting on the years of Pocahontas' life amongst the English. This is a layered examination of the many stressors she experienced in 1613, 1617. Additionally, John is serving as a leading historian for Chesterfield County's 250th anniversary of the American Revolution and is finishing his second book, Valley Forge of the South, Chesterfield Courthouse, Continental Army Barracks, 1780-1781. John lives in Moseley in Chesterfield County with his wife Mary and their many children. This man is extremely qualified, so we are lucky to have him here. Let's welcome John Pagano.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Sometimes I use a mic. I don't use a mic normally, so I feel weird with this in my hand. But I'll probably pull this away and eventually use my public speaking voice. It's interesting that when I knew I was going to be in this hall, back in the Hudson Valley of New York, it's actually where I began when I was 16 years old. And I was in a local history group, and the man who was in charge of that group when I was 16 said, I want you to go to the American Legion. I want you to talk to everybody about that town, Walden, New York's Civil War soldiers that were formed there. And the building that it was in was actually the former Grand Army of the Republic Hall. So they wanted me to do that. And that was when I was 16, talking to many interesting people who were looking at me like, what's this young guy saying? And from there, I was hooked. And so look where I am now, right? So we're gonna do, I guess, this presentation. I heard last weekend it was Dick Cheatham was here doing John Rolfe, right? Yeah, I know him from many years back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to blend today's presentation into what you might have heard if you were here for the last one. One of the things I'm going to focus on with Pocahontas is perhaps the things you never heard before, which is what my job was, is to research those things. And I'm going to put it out there for you. In the end of this, what I'm going to try to do is finish off with John Rolfe again. I'm going to put this to you in the way that this story shakes out, which is there's a lot of mysteries here. And we'll get to those mysteries. But the biggest one of all is that John Rolfe literally vanishes from Virginia in March of 1622. A human being with his prominent name vanishes. All right, we'll get to that. All right, so our presentation today, the English Pocahontas. The reason why those dates are important, the reason why I wanted to put it in a book, is because most of what we know about Pocahontas is after she is with the English, in her captivity, and then her marriage to John Rolfe, and then her death, because there's a lot of English who write it down. Keep in mind that if the English left Virginia without this success, we wouldn't know anything about Pocahontas except for she was a footnote in history by Captain John Smith. She would be gone forever as this little tiny figure of English history. But now everybody in the world knows her. Why? Because of these years. All right, so the thing is where to start. I always start on March 21st, 1617, the anniversary of her death. She's still buried in England today. How does a Powhatan girl wind up being buried under a church in Gravesend, England? I mean, that's a fascinating question to itself, but we're going to go through the process. What got her to be buried under the church floor in Gravesend, England? All right, we're going to definitely get to that. I'm going to throw some things at you. Be prepared. Pocahontas is not the first native in Virginia to marry a European. The first native to marry a European in Virginia history is Luisa Menendez. When the Spanish come up into Virginia, long before Jamestown, a Spanish soldier finds a wife with one of the native tribes around what's modern-day Saltville, Virginia. It's hard for you to imagine the Spanish around Saltville, Virginia, which is in the far southwest corner of Virginia. He's going to take this woman back to what is now around, we'll call it Salisbury, North Carolina, and eventually back to what is now Parris Island, South Carolina, Marine Corps. And then from there to the garrison at St. Augustine. And afterwards, she's going to actually post a pension with the Spanish, and that's how we know she was married to him. So this native woman will marry a Spaniard in the 16th century from Virginia. All right? There's other native females that we don't follow. I don't know why. I guess they're just not prominent. The one that lived within a musket shot of where we're sitting is this woman, a Pocahontas. She is the tribal leader of the Appomattox Indians, which you are familiar with the Appomattox River. Well, the Appomattox tribe, she is one of the two principal leaders. Her brother and her run the tribe. She is at the headwaters, what is now Point of Rocks. That's where her town was, and that is where she watched out for her people's river. And if you want to ask any Englishman in the 17th century what tribe and what person they thought was intimidating, it was a Pocahontas, right? Now, she pretty much went after the English on several occasions. The English went after her in 1610, and they chase her down with her tribal warriors, and she gets killed in battle. Who's ever heard of her? So if you ever want to go to where her town was, just drive across the bridge on Route 10, go up the hill, take a left toward Dodd Park, and that was her community. Right, that's where she was. So this is Kakakoeski, and she will be the queen of the Pamunkey and the last Powhatan Indian leader. Kakakoeski is going to be, she would probably want to know why Pocahontas is more famous than her. She will sign the last treaty with the English, the Treaty of Middle Plantation in 1677. And so the Treaty of Middle Plantation is why you still have Powhatan tribes in Virginia today, and why the English did not drive them all away, because of this treaty. If you ever see on the news and you see there's native people bringing poles with deer and turkey up the steps of the Capitol building in Richmond, it's because of this treaty. The native tribes still honor that agreement, and they still bring tribute to the Virginia Capitol and the governor. Now, Kakakoeski's a neat woman because, there's many things, but her last husband was an Englishman. Her son is on the Treaty of Middle Plantation, listed as son of Kakakoeski, is referred to as Captain West. So her son was so prominent between her and her English husband that he had a rank of a captain. But he signs the treaty on behalf of both English and Native people. And the reason why I'm touching on all this is because there's so many Native women that we could talk about. There's a lot of Native women we could talk about, but we don't talk about as much. We talk about Pocahontas, right? Lily of the Mohawks, where I grew up, she's all over the place if you're studying in New York, but no one's heard of her around the world. She's another one, right? So when we get back to this story of Pocahontas, where do we get her? And why is she in our minds right now? If I said to you or any of your family members, anybody on the streets of Hopewell, and I said, hey, have you heard of Pocahontas? What's the percentage of people that have heard of Pocahontas?
100.
Almost, gotta be near 100%. All right? So we take a look at her timeline, right? from the time she's born in the mid-1590s to the time she dies on March 21st, 1617, things happen to her that bring her into our brains today. We're gonna look at that a little more closely. In the 1840s, Lydia Huntley Sigourney writes this poem about Pocahontas. And when I read it, I literally am over my computer in tears because of what she wrote about. She finishes it off with the moment where her son Thomas Rolfe, who is sick with her on the ship in quarantine in Gravesend, she wrote in this poem the moment where Pocahontas dies holding her child. And this is in, again, the 1840s. They're still writing, continuing to write about Pocahontas. But I always recommend this poem if you ever want to see how our society views Pocahontas, not in our time period, but even in the 19th century. All right, so what events lead up to this? This moment in Gravesend, England, where Pocahontas is gone for us forever. You've probably heard that Pocahontas was taken prisoner. People have heard that. People that study this, I've been in the professional circle where everyone's just like, yeah, she was just kidnapped by the English. And I guess in some degree that's true. But if you read the letters of the man who took her prisoner, that would be Captain Samuel Argall. Captain Samuel Argall is going to, he replaces Captain John Smith, who I'm sure a lot of you have heard of. And that when Captain John Smith blows himself up with gunpowder and has to leave Virginia, Argall takes his job. His job is to travel across the Chesapeake and meet with tribes to trade with the English. And so in one of these expeditions, he is making friends with the Potawatomis, right? The Potawatomis. And it's taken me 18 years studying this stuff to say that name right. It took me longer to get Kakakoeski right, by the way. But no, the Potawatomis, what we've done over a few hundred years is we've slowed it down, changed it around, and now we just call it the Potomac, right? The Potawatomis are the tribes of Northern Virginia, all right? So Pocahontas, she's married into them at 14 years old. She's married to a Potawatomi warrior named Cocoam. Now, Captain Argall, he's trading with the Potawatomis because the Potawatomis are neutral. They're like Switzerland. And he hears that she's in one of the towns there, and he's like, I gotta go get her. All right? Now, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the story that she's taken prisoner, but this is how it goes. Pocahontas is in this town called Patanzi, which is in modern-day Quantico, Virginia. I'm sure you know where that is. She's married at 14 to a warrior named Cocoam. Why she's married to him? Long story. It's probably because she had done something wrong to her father. What did she do wrong to her father, John? What she had done wrong to her father is that she stole her father's favorite English prisoner, an English boy named Henry Spelman, from him. Stole him in the middle of the night, away from her father's bedchambers, 2 days' journey to the north of the Potawatomis. Now, who was Henry Spelman? Henry Spelman was an English interpreter. Spelman had been left with tribes to learn the Powhatan language, and when Powhatan found out, he got him. And he kept him as his personal Google. Spelman's there. Hey, Spelman, tell me, where's gunpowder come from? Hey, what's your king like? So Spelman basically is just living with Powhatan, and Pocahontas one night decides, hey, I'm gonna get him out of here. And she does. So where does she bring him? She brings him to the Potawatomi because she knows the English are friends with them. It's pretty smart. Okay, so what do you do if you're the Potawatomis? If you give Pocahontas back to her father, he's gonna kill her. If you give back Henry Spelman, you won't give him to the English. That means you don't get the cool reward from the English. So they keep Spelman, they keep Pocahontas. And that's when when Pocahontas is found with them. So what does Captain Argall say to the Potawatomi? Hey, I heard you have Pocahontas here. I want her. Okay, well, that could be a problem. Her father might not like what we're going to do with you. Hey, don't worry about that. I'm Captain Argyle. I'm Captain Argyle. I got this. But if you don't give me Pocahontas, Patawomax, I will not give you any more hatchets. No more knives. No more glass beads. No more copper. No more copper kettles. You got to give me Pocahontas, so the deals are off. So the Patawomac had to make a decision between trade goods and her, and what do you think they chose? Trade goods. So she now goes to Jamestown. Goodbye, Pocahontas. So what does Argyle ultimately write to her father? Or he doesn't write because Powhatan doesn't read, so he's got to send another interpreter. The message says, let him know that I have taken his daughter, and if he would send home the Englishmen who he has detained in slavery with such arms and tools as the Indians had gotten and stolen, and also a great quantity of corn, that he should have his daughter restored. All right, there's the deal. So the question for you is, how long do you think it would take Powhatan to answer that? Well, Secretary of the Colony, Ralph Hamer, he's at Jamestown, he's around Pocahontas, around the situation. He wrote, and it is true we heard nothing of him for 3 months after, when by persuasions of others, he returned us 7 of our men, with each a musket unserviceable, sent us word that whensoever we pleased to deliver his daughter, he would give us the satisfaction of his injuries. So this is what Powhatan does. You're Pocahontas, you're sitting at Jamestown. You're waiting for your dad to be like, oh, he's gonna get me. No, because remember what you did to him? You took his Google. You took Henry Spellman. He's mad at you. So what we have is a situation where Powhatan, he's trying to answer this, but he's really weighing, do I really want my daughter back? So we all know how long it takes him to get word back to the English. It takes 2 days. He took 3 months. And then he doesn't really give everything the English want, just the things he could get. All right, here you go. Oh, by the way, if this isn't what you really wanted, come see me whenever you get a chance. Until that is worked out between the English and him, where's Pocahontas got to stay? With the English. So what message does that send to her? I don't know if I want you back. Maybe, we'll see. So that's the situation. And keep in mind, the question is, who's lying? Argyle's like, oh yeah, we did this right away. Everything was quick. We did it all. Hamer's saying, well, it really is a different message and it took 3 months. So when you're reading the English accounts, you gotta be really careful because they contradict each other all the time. So for me, what I do, I gotta double check all this. And Hamer is probably the most qualified to answer because he's sitting in the Capitol around the leadership. All right, so we go with him. I'm going to remind you what the King of England, just to get a Virginia charter, just for the Virginia company to be in business, the King's instructions have to be followed, or you run a risk of him revoking your charter. The King's instructions about treating the Indians is very well written out. It says, well entreat those savages in those parts and use all good means to draw the savages and heathen people to the true service and knowledge of God, and that all just, kind, and charitable courses shall be holden with such of them as shall conform themselves to any good in social traffic. All right, what that means is that if there are Indians that are working with you and are good with you, do well with them. So tell me, how do you think Sir Thomas Dale, who is the High Marshal of Virginia, felt about the best friend the English had on the Indian side being kidnapped? Sir Thomas Dale didn't order it. None of the leadership ordered it. Captain Samuel Argyle just did it against the king's wishes, mind you. So I want you to keep that in mind, that the abduction of Pocahontas is not a leadership decision. It was a rogue decision. and now the English are handling it the best way they can, and now Powhatan is trying to handle it the best way he can. But keep in mind, if he does everything the English ask of him, he'll look weak. This is a very complicated situation. So Sir Thomas Dale, I know you've heard of him. Hopefully you've heard of him, right? Yeah. All right. My site would be aghast if you didn't hear of it. Okay. So Sir Thomas Dale, he is the fixer. He is specifically brought to Virginia in 1611 with Reverend Alexander Whitaker to fix the problem that is the colony of Virginia. And who is Dale? Dale in his period is Darth Vader, right? That is the best way to see him. He even dresses like Darth Vader. So when we look at this story of Dale steps into this situation. He simply cannot just let Pocahontas be sitting at Jamestown in a limbo world, and there's no communications with Powhatan for his daughter. Something's got to work out here. So Dale steps in and takes responsibility for the mess that Argyle creates. Why? Because he's the High Marshal. But here's the other thing. Dale and Reverend Whitaker are very, very evangelical. They're brought here because they are. There are religious investors in the Company of London that clearly want this colony to be more heavier on the religion, less on the do whatever you want, right? So the structure of these guys is important. So what's Dale do? Well, Dale simply says, okay, I got a Pocahontas situation where I have a Powhatan Indian living amongst my people, which in England is against the law, because in England, the laws is very clear. If you are somebody who is an infidel could be anybody who's, well, let's go down the list, Catholic, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, wait a minute, anybody that's not baptized in the Church of England. You cannot reside in England. Why? Because you are not a citizen. The only thing that makes you a citizen in England is baptism in the Church of England. You're English then. She's not. So she has to be asked, like anybody visiting London who is from abroad, are you going to stay in England? If so, we got to have you talk to the clergy. And that's the process. So Pocahontas has to be asked, are you willing to study our Church of England? What's she going to say? Can she leave? Not really. So she kind of has to. So when that decision takes place with Dale, he's going to bring her up to where he is. I mean, that's Henricus, right? He's not going to leave her down with the people who eat each other at Jamestown. Sorry, that was bad. Eat each other out of the grave at Jamestown. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Okay. It's terrible, right? All right, so just a reminder, remember, Dale is the guy who takes the English from Jamestown upriver to finish the idea that they're going to create a capital town moving inland. That's Henricus, right? So just keep that in mind. So when we look at where we're at, but I also want to point out of where Powhatan is at, okay? Powhatan's right up here. There's Dale, here's Jamestown, right? Powhatan strongholds everywhere. And Dale brings her up there, not here. Why? Because he's there, but also she's going to be in more seclusion. All right? She's going to be in more seclusion at Henricus. We'll get to that in a second. So we talked about that. Dale doesn't know Pocahontas except for by name. Dale, he's never met her. So now he's probably heard about her a little bit. Now he's taking responsibility. But one thing is very clear about Dale. Dale is going to essentially change history by this move. History changes the second Dale gets involved in this. And I'm going to put things in a map for where we're at. All right, just a few things. Dale is creating what he sees as the future of Virginia. Henricus is going to build Rokedale, he's going to build Coxondale, Bermuda Hundred, Bermuda City, all these places, right, we're at now. Pocahontas is being brought into that world. But Dale at this point doesn't know what's going to become of this situation. Not yet. Not yet. So where does Pocahontas get to live? Well, we're pretty certain that she was living with Reverend Alexander Whitaker, Dale's minister. Makes the most sense. I mean, where do you trust people more? Hey, Pocahontas, you're going to live in a fort with 150 dudes. Or the minister, who has a few people living with him. It's probably the better deal. So that's where we believe it all happened, okay? So she was probably living at Rock Hall, which was a mile or so from the fort of Henricus. Isolation, easy to learn, easy to study, not watched, not bothered. That's where she probably is. All right, I'm gonna quote, this is Dale's letter. Again, we have his writings. We have Reverend Whitaker's writings. We have Dale's writings. We have John Rolfe's writings. The only person's writings we don't have is Pocahontas's. So we gotta use these guys. What do they say? Well, Dale says this in June of 1614, after the marriage to John Rolfe. This is what he says. Pocahontas' daughter I carefully instructed in Christian religion, who after she made some good progress therein, renounced publicly her country idolatry, openly confessed her Christian faith, was as she desired baptized, and is since married to an English gentleman. Were it but the gaining of this one soul, I will think my time, toil, and stay well spent. Dale in his writings is very clear. He does not care about tobacco. Not really. His big focus is, what can I do with the Indians? Can I get them to peace? That's great. But ultimately, my evangelical self with Whitaker is that we want to bring the introduction of Christianity to them. That's my big number one mission. And that's what he writes on a few occasions. So when we look at this story, it is becoming clear that to Dale, this is a great happenstance. This could be a big moment for us, right? The evangelical mission. How many times do you hear that in the history books in the Virginia SOLs for kids? You don't read it, you don't see it, but it's everywhere. It's everywhere, all right? Dale even writes it, again, several times. Where my principal care hath been to get some of our savages to whom we may teach both our language and religion. Principal care, that's his number one care that he has. All right? All right, Whitaker. If you've heard of Whitaker, well, no, I won't do this. I never get anybody raising their hand. Some of you might have heard of Whitaker. Yeah, see, somebody. I always get disappointed, right? I'm like, oh, who's heard of Whitaker? Nobody. Yeah, see, TJ in the back, I see you.
I have a picture of him in my home.
Okay, awesome. All right. So this is where I feel bad, right? As a not that I was a minister, but kind of a teacher type. But so this is Whitaker's father, Dr. William Whitaker, who was a celebrity minister at Cambridge and back in that day. So Whitaker basically is an academic. He is the brains of this operation, right? And when we look at this, if you want to understand where they think this colony is going, you have to read his letters. Because Whitaker is outlining, what are we doing here? To Whitaker, his vision is different than Argyl's. His mission is different than other people's, but his is the academic identity of Virginia. Well, what's he say? What are we going to be doing here in Virginia? Well, Whitaker, if you read his stuff, he wants to, over time, mix the two societies into one new society, meaning English people marry Indian people marry English people. We have new babies that are both cultures together, enacting the work of God. Is that a different idea? That might not even be how English people see the idea at the time. But his letters bear that out. Okay? So Whitaker is fascinated by the Powhatan people. This is one of his quotes. They are a very understanding generation, quick of apprehension, sudden in their dispatches, subtle in their dealings, exquisite in their inventions, and industrious in their labors. They observe the limits of their own possessions and encroach not upon their neighbors' dwellings. Murder is a capital crime scarce heard amongst them. Many footsteps of God's image. We all have Adam for a common parent. So I want you to imagine a minister of his reputation writing back to England to a lot of religious leaders. And he's saying that these pagan worshipers, native people, my little dots here, I have a lot of other stuff right there, but I didn't put it in this quote. Basically what he's saying, and he does say, is that the native people have many footsteps of God's image with them. Meaning, if you want to see what real Christians look like, it's the native people. And why was he saying that? Well, he goes down a list about 10 pages long. I can't put it all up on here. So what he's trying to do is say to the people back in England, if you want to see a good culture, a smart culture, one that respects each other's boundaries, properties, and rights, it's the native people. Oh, God. Oh, and he says we all have Adam for a common parent. So what he's trying to write back to England is, there's not much difference between the native people and us. Right? We all have Adam for a common parent. This is important in the Pocahontas story because he needs somebody to use as an example for people in England to see that. And that person will be Pocahontas. She will be the living, breathing poster child to bring back into the English world to say, look what she does. Look, uh-oh, I broke it. There we go. All right, so I'm gonna have to go with my natural voice. I'm telling you, my voice can break anything. All right, so we're at the point now where Pocahontas has to live amongst the English, being taught by Reverend Whitaker, having Sir Thomas Dale, Darth Vader, as her boss. So what kind of stressors was she under? Well, that's the fun part of this discussion. In order for you and me to have a successful Virginia that doesn't fall apart, she has to marry John Rolfe, which isn't happening because she's not baptized. She doesn't baptize, there's no marriage. No marriage to Rolfe, the English pack up and go home. So what does she have to deal with in this situation? Well, let's talk about that. The emotional stressors are simple. Abduction, captivity, relationship with her father is not good. She won't see her first husband anymore, Cocoa, that Potawatomi warrior she married when she was 14, she won't see him anymore. Physical stressors. I want you to imagine wearing a bikini on a nice Brazilian beach, and then, oh no, now I gotta wear 7 pounds of wool and linen. That's what she has to change from. Her native clothing in the summertime weighs 1/2 pound. Her English women's clothing weighs 6 to 7 pounds. How she goes to the bathroom is going to change. Going to the bathroom is different when you're wearing that 6 to 7 pounds of clothing. What she eats and what she drinks is different. Pocahontas would have exclusively a water diet. Water, 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 water. Water, water, water. English don't drink water. What do English people drink? Tea. What, tea? Not yet. They don't have that yet. Not really. Not kind of. They don't have cocoa yet. They don't have coffee yet. They don't have tea yet. No, it's coming. No, the English drink alcohol with all meals and all day long. Beer mostly, all right? So how's Pocahontas going to fare from that switch? The English are dairy consumers. The English eat tons of dairy, butter, cheese, milk, all those things. Every single native person in this hemisphere is lactose intolerant. She wouldn't know it. Why are they lactose intolerant? Because there's no cows in this North America. Therefore, they've never had dairy. All right, That sounds like a physical stressor. Intellectual stressors. In order for her to baptize satisfactorily with Reverend Whitaker, she has to, in 7 to 9 months, learn to read English. She's got to read English so she can legitimately say she can comprehend the Bible that he is catechizing with her. Then she just, at some point, has to say, I am stopping my sun worship. I'm not praying to the sun anymore, and I'm switching it over. If you were to interview any Powhatan Indian 400 years ago and say, hey, what's your big fear if you stop praying to the sun? Every single one of them would tell you that nature would get revenge on them if they do not pray to the sun enough. That they would have their crops decimated, the grass will not grow, rain will not fall from the sky. All the things that will happen in nature will be bad if we don't pray to the sun enough. So imagine those first conversations Whitaker has with her. It's like, can't pray to the sun anymore. So when we think about the stressors she has to go through, emotional, physical, intellectual, they're huge, huge. How she handled it? Well, how would you have handled it? So when we come back to the stressors, right? She's pretty much at this point a captive with her friends, the English. She can't go anywhere. Why she does this, how she does it, a little bit of a mystery still. However, let's ask the question, how could it happen? How would it happen? So you probably know Pocahontas' English name, right? It's a biblical name. It's Rebecca, right? I have people come across me who are very religious. I have people come across who don't know anything about Christianity. I have some people who are not Christians, yet they know about the book Genesis. And they've heard the phrase and the teachings of Rebecca. Now, that's going to be Pocahontas' name, Rebecca. Well, we know that Rebecca comes from Genesis, and we know the story that she will be plucked away from her home in the desert to marry Isaac, who she's never met before. So keep that in mind, because if you ever want to know, well, I don't have anything from Pocahontas tells me why she did it. Well, if you read Genesis and read the story of Rebecca, you're going to read why Rebecca did it. And clearly Rebecca is the name that's plucked to be given to Pocahontas. Whether she chose it or Whitaker did, I couldn't tell you. But it is chosen. All right. So Whitaker's working on Pocahontas' baptism. Remember that Powhatan wanted the English. Hey, I'm sorry, I didn't finish all your demands. If you want to finish this discussion for my daughter, then you're going to have to come see me. We'll finish talking about it. Well, Darth Vader takes him up on that. Now, keep in mind, Dale is building 5 new settlements up here, right? It's not like he can just go, well, I'm going to go see Powhatan today. But he does go see Powhatan. He finishes building Henricus, Coxendale, Rokedale, Bermuda Hundred, Bermuda City, otherwise known as Hopewell. And finally, in 1614, he goes, now is the time. It's been 9 months. I'll go see Powhatan. I'll figure this out. Oh, by the way, I'm going to take 150 of my men in armor. Now, that might sound really good, right? Hey, I'm going to bring 150 of my men in armor with muskets to Powhatan. He is literally taking his 150 men on ships to the Powhatan capital to confront Powhatan about his daughter and what they're going to do with her. How many Powhatan warriors do you think are near the capital of Powhatan?
100.
A lot, all right? Several hundred, 1,000, whatever it is. So Dale goes up there, and eventually he gets close to the capital with his men. And what's awaiting him in the way? This guy named Pagano. Never heard of him.
Oh, yes, I have.
See, and there's always somebody. There's always somebody. All right, he's heard of it. All right, Pagano will become the new leader of the Powhatans. But at this time, he is the XO of Powhatan. He's the #1 war leader of the Powhatans. And he's got several hundred bowmen in the path of Dale's guys. So I want you to imagine this now. Dale's got his guys facing off against the Powhatan warriors, and there's Powhatan over there in his capital. What's the next move going to be? Whose move will it be? Well, at this moment, oh, by the way, who do you think guided Dale's ship up those rivers that Dale's never been up? Pocahontas. Oh man, I don't know. So when Pocahontas is the only person that can really guide her to where Dale wants to go. She's on the ship. John Rolfe is on the ship. Everybody's on the ship. Now it's a case of what's going to happen next. Pocahontas knows there's going to be a bloodbath. She sends word to her father, "Hey, Dad, let's talk." He sends word back to Dale's ship that she's on, says, "No, thank you." He says no to his daughter. He'll never see her again. Powhatan's offer. So Powhatan refused to see his daughter. What's he do? Apparently he sends her brothers to Dale's ship. So I want you to imagine you're Pocahontas. Your father will never see you again, said no on this occasion. Your brothers come to see you. And they're talking to Pocahontas on Dale's ship. John Rolfe and an interpreter, meanwhile, are trying to be liaisons to see Powhatan. Pagano will liaison with them. You know why I hate this story? Because with all these groups meeting and talking, not a single Englishman wrote down what those conversations were. John Rolfe, you're in the middle of them. You write about, hey, you know, Fred's pigs got in the garden over here, but yet doesn't write down this conversation. I don't get it. So you have two conversations taking place. One near the Powhatan capital, John Rolfe and an interpreter. You have Pocahontas and her brothers talking on board Dale's ship, which is like the floating headquarters. I'm going to give you the factoid here. 1 month after those conversations, Pocahontas is married to John Rolfe. What do you think those conversations were about in those two separate conversations? We have Powhatan's sons coming to talk to Pocahontas, and we have Pagano talking to Rolfe. People ask me 1,000, if not 1,000,000 times, whose idea was it that Rolfe and Pocahontas marry, or Pocahontas marries an Englishman? It is clearly not an Englishman's idea. Not a single Englishman wrote down, we want Pocahontas to marry an Englishman like John Rolfe. Nobody did that. What we do have is after these conversations that Powhatan instigates, we have a marriage a month later. Clearly now from that, it is Powhatan who offered his daughter to the English. The question is, will an Englishman marry her? We know that answer in hindsight. We know John Rolfe will marry her. But keep in mind, John Rolfe is a widower when he's in Virginia. His wife and child, they were both buried on the island of Bermuda. They got shipwrecked there. Both of them died, and they are there. He's now in Virginia. And let's face it, he's a leading colonist. Might be middling in England, but he's a leading colonist here. His great moment, he introduces Spanish seed tobacco to Virginia. Okay, great. That's moving in the right direction. So what will he be known for today? We wouldn't even know about the tobacco if he doesn't marry Pocahontas. So clearly, the marriage to Pocahontas is the biggest moment. In order for Rolfe to take up Powhatan's offer, Rolfe has to go through Sir Thomas Dale. He literally has to write a permission letter. Writes Sir Thomas Dale and says, these are the reasons why I will marry Pocahontas. If it's okay, I'll be the one doing it. That letter is 7 pages of fun for anybody who likes history. Because John Rolfe will go from a sinner, to godly man, to here's why I'll do it. He writes it all out. It's a great document for a researcher. Some of what he wrote was this. He said, God hath often demanded of me why I was created, if not for transitory pleasures and worldly vanities, but to labor in the Lord's vineyard. He believes that the God has sent him to Virginia for some special purpose. And then he answers this about, I just put this for funsies. How does an Englishman view the attractions of a native woman? He writes that out. Thank you, John Rolfe. One party says, quote, sure, if I were so sensually inclined, I might satisfy such desire, yet with Christians more pleasing to the eye. Now let me slow that down for you because it took me 18 years to get this right. What John Rolfe is saying is that, well, Pocahontas is not really all that Disney-like. He's basically saying, look, and I can put the whole quote. He actually references English women. What John Rolfe is looking at physically is somebody that looks very different than his own people. Keep in mind that Pocahontas, from the time she reaches puberty, 13, 14, 15, 16, she is starting to tattoo her face. So when she is married to Cocoam years before, she would have a turtle on her cheek, she'd have dots and lines, she'd have some arrows over here. The Powhatan women love to make their face the template for their tattoos. Biceps and thighs are also tattooed. It's just what they do. So when John Rolfe is going to go on his honeymoon night, his candle, she rolls over, there's stuff there. So I'm not saying that John Rolfe is maybe saying, well, she's ugly. I'm just saying that John Rolfe is being honest. She's got art on her face. My people haven't done that in a long time. Right? But they used to. All right. So he says, I will daily pray God to bless me, to mine, and her eternal happiness. He does use the word love in his letter. Right? So John Rolfe, in his letter to Dale, does write it all out. And he writes everything he should write. And Dale gives permission. All right, so on April 5th, 1614, they are going to be married. All right, Sir Thomas Dale, I just want to meet Sir Thomas Dale once and say, hey, Darth Vader, you write down everything else in your letters, everything. Sir Thomas Dale writes down in one letter every square acreage of what every man can garden down to its detail, yet doesn't write what church they were married in. Instead, he writes they were in the church. Well, there's a church at Henricus. There's a church here at Bermuda City. There's a church at Jamestown. Which church? Nope. And you would think, hey, who married them? That's important. Nope. We're not going to write down the minister or the church. You know what? It didn't happen. Ah, man, it kills me. The stuff they write out and the stuff they don't write out. All right, so we all know what happens, right? They marry, John Rolfe and Pocahontas marry. Sir Thomas Dale, who was tasked with fixing Virginia, fixes it. He doesn't really, I'm going to give this to Powhatan. Powhatan offers the situation that allows Dale and Whitaker to fix the colony. It is simply a marriage alliance. If you marry Pocahontas, we are now allies. We are now good together. You English colonists can now go unfettered in what you need to do in my land to see what happens because you married my daughter. Dale needs to bring that home. He needs to bring it back to his people and leaders and say, look what I did. Here's my victory lap. So John, Rebecca, and son Thomas, with a delegation of a dozen Indians, Powhatans, go to England. So what's Pocahontas going to be? She's going to be propaganda for the Virginia Company. Look what we did. Look what peace we're at. Look at the situation. The problem is, England is deforested. All of their houses are heated by coal. She's now going to go live in that town of London, 250,000 people, with coal keeping everybody warm. What could possibly go wrong? Now, the reason why I say that is because what do you think was happening to her body with all these stressors and then her birth to birthing Thomas? What was her physical condition at that point like? Yeah, there's not a lot of good things going on, and now you're putting her in another unhealthy situation known as London, England. So she's going to be brought out of London to the countryside where she has an awkward encounter with her friend Captain John Smith, who, by the way, Pocahontas had one legit friend of the English, Captain Smith. Definitely a friend. Nobody told this poor girl that he didn't die. In the years he left Virginia for England, nobody told her. She confronted him in a party where she has tears in her eyes, and Smith, to his credit, wrote it all down. And she said to him, "What is up with you English, that you lie this way?" And to her, a lie is that the English never told her he wasn't dead. So she was not happy. So, another stressor. So now she's got to come back. She's been put on tour for 9 months. She met the king, she met the queen. Now she's going to come back, and they're going to continue the work. Reverend Whitaker's still back here. They're going to continue the work of blending the two societies. Slowly over time, as Reverend Whitaker would say, cast thy bread into the water. So what happens to her? Well, she gets on board the ship. The Rolfes are going on the ship. I love it. The ship's name is George, by the way. Always seems very anticlimactic, right? What's that ship that's going to take you across the ocean? It's George. It's the George. So they're on the ship George, and I want to give you a little process. Back then, to go on board those ships, there would be a physician representing the Virginia Company, that kind of thing. Do you have any spots on your face? Do you have a big sweat when you shouldn't? Does it look like you're sickly? And they wouldn't let you go. Pretty standard stuff for hundreds of years. She's okay enough to go on the ship to come back with the Rolfe family. Okay. So how long did she go down the Thames? One day. One day. She is on that ship and she is in quarantine with her son Thomas on that ship. What got her? I don't know. My educated guess is the most obvious answer, which is the bloody flux, which is viral dysentery. Viral dysentery, when you're already sickly, will kill you in about, 3 or 4 days, which is what got her. If you're not sure what viral dysentery is, it is a high fever and bloody diarrhea. So she's in quarantine, she dies there. Her last words that we know of were, "All must die, but enough her child should liveth. All right? So that's the St. George Church that she is now buried under. That is a 18th century replacement for the earlier one that came down. But she's still under there, somewhere. If you go to that church today, you walk into the vestry book, which is right at the top of the stairs entering the building, is the original book that has the entry written in ink of Pocahontas being buried there, which is really super cool. Rebecca Rolfe, oh, by the way, see the spelling? W-R-O-T-H. I'm going to let you know something fun because that's what I do. John Rolfe himself does not spell his name the same way in 2 or 3 occasions. You can spell your name any way you want in this time period. It doesn't matter. There's no standardized dictionary. It's just however you sound it out that day. W-R-O-T-H. Well, let's try the R-O-L-P-H John Rolfe name. Or let's try to put an E at the end of that. Or let's try another version of that Rolfe with the W. That's fun researching. Okay, I'm off my rant. So it says, wife of Thomas Rolfe. They didn't get it right. Thomas Rolfe is the son. John's the husband. So anyway, it says a Virginia lady born was buried in the chancel. There she is. So what happens after her poor death? Pocahontas dies in March 1617. Reverend Whitaker, who wants the English and the Indians to live forever in peace, blended as one society, drowns right over here in the water somewhere. Powhatan, following year, he dies, he's gone. Sir Thomas Dale, with his promotion, is sent to the far reaches of India and Indonesia, where he gets the bloody flux. We know that for sure, and he's dead and buried in India in 1619. John Rolfe, he will sign his will in early March 1622. He will be dead. Oh, sorry. We don't know he died. He just vanishes. We'll get to that in a minute. Conclusions. Pocahontas' marriage saved the Virginia Company. Without the marriage and alliance, they are dead, they're just stopped. They're dead. They're stopped in the water, can't move, powerless. The king is going to say, and the investors will say, pack it up and come home. No doubt. Powhatan gained ultimate trade with the English and was doing quite well with his people with that for several years. The English for sure used that alliance to grow. In those 7 years, the population will grow, women will come, babies are born. The English will not look back after this. And what is it? Well, what follows Virginia? Massachusetts, the rest of the colonies, India, other colonies, Australia. What you're looking at in Virginia with Pocahontas' marriage to Rolfe is the beginning of the British Empire, which changes the history of the world. So in essence, Pocahontas and the Rolfe marriage changes the history of the world. So we do this every day. This is what we talk about. When you're at my site, we're always talking about this topic. We're the only place in the country, in Virginia, that really delves into this every day.